Hey YouTube, what's up? It's KShard22 here, bringing you guys a brand new series. Over the next couple of videos, we'll be going over optimizing your Windows 10 PC. Now, the topics that I will be talking about can actually be used in Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8. But of course, we'll be performing everything that I do in Windows 10 Professional. Now, of course, everything can also be done in Windows 10 Home if that were a question. We'll be going over reviewing Task Manager, we'll review the startup items, and we'll review system files. I'll show you guys third-party apps that I use actually in production where, I test, to see what sort of programs are out of date, what sort of drivers are out of date, cleaning tools, what I recommend. And of course, we'll go over Device Manager for those who are not familiar with that. We will spend quite a bit of time on that and how you can obtain driver updates from the manufacturer. I'll show you guys how to properly do a BIOS flash update. And then lastly, I'll show you how to use driver update tools, and they are awesome. They are, a wonderful thing to have. So let's go ahead and get started with reviewing Task Manager. A lot of us are familiar with Task Manager, but how familiar are we with it? The easiest way to access your Task Manager is going to be to hit Control-Shift-Escape on your keyboard, or you can right-click in your taskbar if you have free room and actually right-click and hit Task Manager. You'll be probably brought up the first time with this little window. This will show you every open program currently. It's pretty simple. If you wanted to kill Firefox, you can just click End Task, and that kills your Firefox. I really hope I didn't have anything important, and the same with Microsoft Outlook. You can see that those programs will actually close. Now, if we expand this, we'll be able to see a lot more details. Now, with newer computers that are pretty high up there, you can actually update the update speed, so it's super fast. It's constantly getting the latest update on your components, but of course I normally just keep mine on normal. That is going to consume some resources if you set that at high speed, but you could go ahead and sort these by what sort of resources are being used the most, what programs are taking up the most resources. Of course, I could see my live captures taking the most CPU. That's to be expected, but if you subtract that 35%, we're looking at about 10% CPU usage. I am running VMware currently in the background, and I can see that that's taken up quite a bit of my memory, along with the live screen capture. I've got some desktop things and some anti-malware, so of course half my memory has been used, and I have very low disk usage. How I obtain my low disk usage is using a solid state drive versus a hard disk drive. When you use that hard disk drive, it's using a magnetic disk to store data versus, electronic flash technology using the solid state drive. Here's another neat way. Another neat tool is the performance tool. You can use this if you prefer seeing something that's more graphic. This is going to show you your utilization, your speed of your processor, how many threads you've got, and how many processes. Ideally with Windows 7, I always kind of looked at how many processes I had, and I tried to keep that number as low as possible. That was when I first started off with computers. I would go based off the number of processes. If I was working on someone's computer and they had 225 processes and I cut them down to 200, ideally I saved them 25 processes from running on a computer all the time, right? So just kind of a rule of thumb that I use starting off, but that may not always be the best, considering that some processes take a lot more CPU, a lot more memory, and a lot more disk usage than other programs. We've got memory here. Ideally when I'm not running as much as of what I am right now and I'm just kind of doing homework or whatever, my CPU runs at a low of maybe 6 or 8%, memory's at about 10 or 12%, and my disk usage is almost always at 0%. Ideally, you shouldn't be running these numbers high. If you notice something that's 80% on any of these, you might want to look at expanding, your memory or upgrading to a solid state, and changing out your CPU on a laptop is fairly not normally something most people do. That is quite the job to do. Of course, we could see app history. I've almost hardly ever never used this tab. Startup is a very important tab for you guys who are fairly new to computers. This shows you all of the programs that are starting up at your Windows startup. You can go through and disable the ones that don't really need to be ran. Now, for example, if I disable Java Update Scheduler, all that's going to do is when I start up my computer, it's not going to check automatically for an update. So I'll have to do those updates manually, and that's not normally a big deal, especially since Java updates may not be the most crucial for your Windows computer. You could always do those updates, and if you run a program such as Minecraft that uses Java, once Java launches, normally it does have some sort of update service that automatically checks for an update. And just because I disabled Skype doesn't mean that I can't open Skype still. I can still open Skype, it's just not going to open automatically once I start my computer. Of course, I got a couple of programs such as Intel and Realtek, and these are all associated with drivers that I want to keep enabled. Now, if you have, if anything that's related to driver specific or specific hardware, you want to leave those things enabled because they might actually, you don't want your system or components to be limited or compromised due to their service being disabled. Of course, you can see here the users that are currently logged in. And one neat thing is you can actually disconnect other users and log them off if you're the administrator. Details is actually, if you remember back in Windows 7, this is kind of like the Details tab that you used to see back then. I really do like this to an extent because this is what I kind of first started off with. But this lets you see every process, every program that's kind of running, every instance. So that's kind of neat. You can go through this and it's just basically a glorified process. And another thing is you could sort by name, and I believe nowadays with Windows 10 it'll actually show you background processes versus apps. And I thought, yep, that's pretty much it. Services are a lot different than details in the processes here. Services are kind of things that run in the background. They could be tied to a program. But these aren't necessarily something that you want to run or, disable, because disabling these could actually impact or compromise your system or compromise certain programs. And the only way to get those programs and services, programs or components to start back up is by manually going into this. A lot of times if you screw something up like this, you have to start your computer into safe mode, and you have to remember that specific service that you had, stopped. So a lot of times if you're going to change one of these, you better know what you're doing. Another smart thing to do is possibly to go through these because there could be malware or hidden, viruses on your computer. So if you go through these and you see something that's, does not look right, maybe it says nudity or something sporadic on here, that should be an indicator like this is not a Windows component. This is something I probably do not want on my computer. And you might want to actually research that on Google and see if how you should actually delete that and remove it. Well, you guys, honestly, that's pretty much it for Task Manager. That's basically all the basics. Just always remember Control-Shift-Escape will open that automatically. When in doubt, that's always important. If your taskbar deletes, or if your taskbar disappears, that combination will always, bring you to Task Manager a lot quicker. If you guys like this video and you had questions or whatever, comment below, hit the like button and hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video where we'll look at further into startup items. And there might be actually a lot of things you didn't know about startup items, and believe it or not, you cannot find all startup items in Task Manager. So check out that video. I'll see you guys in that video. See ya.